The desperate request. The emergency klaxons of Mars Colony Beta 7 pierced the red dawn as an unidentified vessel limped through the outer defense perimeter. Governor Sarah Chen stood in the colony's command center, her weathered hands gripping the tactical display as she watched the damaged ship struggle toward their docking bay. The vessel was unlike anything in the human databases. Its hull shimmered with an opalescent quality that seemed to shift colors in the Martian sunlight. "Ship is requesting emergency landing clearance," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. "They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies, but the translator is having trouble with their language patterns." Sarah had served 20 years in Earth's Navy before taking the governorship of Mars Colony Beta 7. She had seen plenty of alien visitors over the past decade since humanity had joined the galactic community, but this felt different. The ship's approach was erratic, desperate even, and her instincts told her this was no routine diplomatic visit. "Grant them clearance for Bay 7, she ordered. "And get me a full security detail down there. Something tells me we're about to receive some very unexpected guests." 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in the docking bay as the alien vessel's hatch slowly opened with a soft hiss of equalizing atmosphere. What emerged was a being unlike any she had encountered in her years of interspecies contact. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall with crystalline blue skin that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Most striking were its eyes, large, multifaceted like cut gemstones, reflecting intelligence and something Sarah recognized immediately: desperation. The being approached slowly, its movements graceful despite obvious exhaustion. When it spoke, the translator rendered its words in precise formal English with an accent that somehow conveyed both dignity and defeat. "I am Velkan Thros, last surviving ambassador of the Zephyrian Confederation," the alien said, performing what appeared to be a bow. "I come before the human government with an urgent plea for mercy." Sarah stepped forward, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. The alien looked at her hand with confusion for a moment before tentatively touching it with his own. The skin felt warm and slightly electric, like touching a smooth stone that had been sitting in sunlight. "Governor Sarah Chen," she replied. "You're welcome here, Ambassador Thros. What kind of help do you need?" The ambassador's large eyes seemed to shimmer with unshed tears. "My people are dying, Governor Chen. Our entire civilization faces extinction within days." Sarah led the ambassador to a private conference room where they could speak without interruption. As Thros settled into a chair designed for human proportions, she poured 2 cups of coffee, offering one to her guest. The alien accepted the cup gratefully, though he merely held it rather than drinking. "Tell me what happened," Sarah said, gently. Thros activated a small device that projected a 3-dimensional star map into the air between them. Sarah could see dozens of star systems marked in different colors: blue for Zephyrian territory, red for hostile forces, and an alarming amount of black for what she assumed were conquered or destroyed worlds. 6 months ago, the Hegemony Empire declared war on our confederation. Thros began, his voice heavy with grief. "They claimed we had violated some ancient trade agreement, but the truth is simpler. They wanted our worlds, our resources, our strategic position in this sector of the galaxy." Sarah studied the map, her military training automatically analyzing the tactical situation. The red markers seemed to surround the blue ones completely, like a closing fist. "How many of your people are we talking about?" she asked. 12 million, souls spread across 14 worlds, Thros replied. "We were never a military people, Governor. The Zephyrian Confederation has existed for 3,000 years as a peaceful alliance of traders and scholars. Our defense fleet consisted of 40 cargo ships with basic weapons." "And the Hegemony?" Thros manipulated the display to show the enemy fleet composition. Sarah felt her blood run cold as hundreds of red markers appeared on the screen. "Over 1,500 warships," he said quietly. "They have conquered 37 different species in the last 2 centuries. Their method is always the same: overwhelming force, complete destruction of military assets, then systematic elimination of the civilian population." Sarah leaned back in her chair, processing the information. She had read intelligence reports about the Hegemony Empire, but they had always seemed like a distant threat, something that affected other parts of the galaxy. Now they were apparently close enough to threaten species that could reach human space. What exactly are you asking for, Ambassador? Thross set down his coffee cup and looked directly at her with those crystalline eyes. Sanctuary. We have converted our remaining cargo ships into evacuation vessels. If we can relocate our population to the outer rim territories, perhaps some of us will survive to preserve our culture and knowledge. The simple dignity of the request struck Sarah like a physical blow. Here was a being representing millions of innocent lives, asking only for a chance to flee genocide. But her mind was already working on a different problem entirely. How long do you have, she asked. Our intelligence suggests the hegemony will complete their conquest of our remaining worlds within 5 days, Thross replied. After that, they will begin what they call purification protocols, the systematic execution of every Zephyrian in the galaxy. Sarah stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the red Martian landscape where humans had built a thriving colony against impossible odds. Her people had a saying that had carried them through centuries of struggle. Nobody gets left behind. It applied to humans, but she was beginning to think it should apply to anyone who asked for help against genocide. Ambassador, I need to make some calls, she said finally. Can you wait here for a few hours? Of course, Governor Chen. Thank you for listening. Most species would have turned us away immediately. As Sarah left the conference room, she felt a familiar fire building in her chest. It was the same feeling she had experienced during her military service when faced with bullies who thought superior numbers made them invincible. The hegemony empire was about to learn something that pirates and raiders had discovered the hard way over the past century. Humans really didn't like bullies. Sarah went directly to the colony's secure communication center and opened priority channels to Earth, Luna Command, and the Jupiter defense stations. Within minutes, she was speaking to officials across the solar system, and within an hour, she found herself on a secure video conference with President Elena Vasquez herself. Governor Chen, the president said from her office in Geneva, "You're telling me we have an alien species facing complete genocide, and they've asked us for help?" That's correct, Madam President. 12 million civilians, 5 days until the enemy finishes their conquest. President Vasquez was quiet for a moment, her dark eyes reflecting the same fire Sarah felt building inside herself. Elena Vasquez had grown up in refugee camps during the climate wars and had built her political career on a simple principle. Those with power had an obligation to protect those without it. General Kane, the president said, turning to address the head of Sol Defense Force who appeared on another screen. What are our fleet capabilities? General Marcus Kane was a tall, lean man whose gray hair and weathered face told the story of 4 decades in military service. Madam President, we currently have 450 active warships of various classes, plus support vessels and troop transports. The fleet could be ready for deployment within 72 hours. Sarah blinked in surprise. She had known humanity had been quietly building its military capacity over the past decades, but she hadn't realized the scale of their preparations. Casualties? President Vasquez asked bluntly. Unknown, ma'am, Kane replied. The hegemony has numerical superiority, but they've never fought humans before. Our tactical analysis suggests they rely heavily on traditional formation fighting and overwhelming firepower. They may not be prepared for human combat doctrine. The president was quiet for another long moment, and Sarah could see her weighing the decision. Starting a war with an empire that had conquered 37 species was not something to undertake lightly. Madam President, Sarah said quietly, if I may offer a personal observation. Go ahead, Governor. I've spent the last hour with Ambassador Thross. This isn't a military alliance asking for help in a territorial dispute. This is a peaceful people facing extinction, and they came to us because they heard humans might care about justice. President Vasquez nodded slowly. General Kane, how quickly can we mobilize? First wave could depart in 48 hours, ma'am. 300 ships with the remainder following within a week. Do it, the president said without hesitation. And General, we're not just evacuating refugees. We're ending this hegemony threat permanently. As communication channels opened across human space, Sarah returned to the conference room where Ambassador Thross waited patiently. He looked up as she entered, hope and fear warring in his crystalline eyes. "Ambassador," she said simply, "humanity has decided to help your people. How many transport ships can you provide?" he asked. "Even 20 would be generous for a species so new to galactic affairs." Sarah smiled, and for the first time since the Zephyrian ship had arrived, she felt truly optimistic about the outcome. "We're not sending transport ships, Ambassador. We're sending our entire fleet, 300 warships with more to follow." Thross stared at her for a long moment, his translator apparently unable to process what he had heard. "Governor Chen, I think there has been a misunderstanding. We cannot pay for military intervention. We only asked for sanctuary." "Ambassador," Sarah said gently, "let me explain something about humans. When someone asks us for help against genocide, we don't just move the victims, we stop the genocide." As the first human warships began preparing for departure from bases across the solar system, Ambassador Thross sent an urgent message to the few remaining Zephyrian worlds. "The humans are coming. All of them. Hold on for 3 more days." The message would prove to be both a promise and a declaration of war that would echo across the galaxy. The Hegemony Empire, which had never faced serious resistance in 2 centuries of conquest, was about to encounter humanity's first rule of interstellar relations. Nobody commits genocide while humans have ships and the will to use them. When humans go to war, Commander Jessica Park stood on the bridge of the UES Determination, watching the blue swirl of hyperspace give way to normal space as 300 human warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zephyr system. What greeted them was a scene from a nightmare. The beautiful blue-green world of Zephyros Prime was surrounded by a massive fleet of dark, angular vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez from the tactical station. Intelligence reports didn't do justice to the size of that fleet. Jessica counted the enemy vessels on her display. Over 800 hegemony warships arranged in perfect geometric formations around the planet, with smaller craft moving between them like worker insects serving a hive. It was an impressive sight, designed to intimidate any potential rescuers into immediate retreat. "Communications, open a channel to all human vessels," Jessica ordered. "And patch in our Zephyrian advisor." Ambassador Thross appeared on the bridge via holographic projection from his position aboard the command vessel. In the 3 days since leaving Mars, the alien diplomat had worked tirelessly with human tactical analysts, providing intelligence about hegemony military doctrine and Zephyrian planetary defenses. "Captain Park," Thross said, his crystalline features reflecting amazement and terror in equal measure. "In 3,000 years of Zephyrian history, no one has ever brought such a fleet to our aid. But the hegemony forces are massive beyond anything we imagined." Jessica smiled grimly. "Ambassador, you're about to see why humans have a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." Before Thross could ask for clarification, Jessica activated the fleet-wide communication channel. 299 other ship captains appeared on her screen, their faces showing the determined focus she had come to recognize in human military personnel facing impossible odds. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we are looking at the largest enemy fleet humanity has ever faced. Intelligence estimates suggest they have numerical superiority of nearly 3 to 1. They have conquered 37 species using the same tactics we see here. Overwhelming numbers arranged in traditional battle formations." Captain Morrison of the heavy cruiser Defiance spoke up from his bridge. "Orders, ma'am?" "We're going to do something they've never experienced," Jessica replied. "We're going to fight like humans. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. Instead of arranging themselves in the neat geometric formations that defined civilized space warfare, the human fleet scattered like a school of fish, each ship moving in seemingly random directions. To the hegemony commanders watching from their massive vessels, it looked like complete chaos. Supreme Admiral Vex of the Hegemony Empire stood in the command chamber of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion. In 50 years of military service, he had never seen such undisciplined behavior from an enemy fleet. "What are they doing?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "Unknown, Supreme Admiral. Their formations make no tactical sense. They appear to be dancing." Vex studied the display with growing irritation. Every species the Hegemony had conquered had followed the same predictable pattern. They would arrange their ships in defensive formations, usually clustering around their most important vessels, making them easy targets for concentrated fire. These humans seem to have no understanding of proper military protocol. "Perhaps they are attempting to confuse us with their primitive tactics," suggested his aide. "Shall we destroy them quickly and return to planetary bombardment?" "Yes," Vex replied. "All ships advance in standard formation, target their largest vessels first." But as the Hegemony fleet began its ponderous advance, something unprecedented happened. The human ships began broadcasting on all frequencies, filling space with sounds no military engagement had ever heard. Music. Not the ceremonial battle. Hymns some species used, but something far more chaotic and energizing. Heavy metal guitar riffs echoed through space alongside orchestral battle themes from human movies. Classical pieces mixed with electronic dance music and ancient war songs from dozens of human cultures. The cacophony was so overwhelming that Hegemony communications officers found themselves struggling to coordinate fleet movements. "Turn off that noise," Vex shouted, but his communications officer looked helpless. "Sir, they're broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. We can't block it all without shutting down our own communications." Meanwhile, aboard the UES Determination, Jessica was implementing a battle plan that would have been impossible with any other species. Human military doctrine had evolved through thousands of years of warfare against enemies with superior numbers and technology. They had learned to be unpredictable, adaptable, and utterly ruthless when protecting the innocent. "All ships, implement Protocol Omega," she announced. "Psychological warfare is authorized. Show them what happens when you threaten people under human protection." The first phase of the human attack was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Instead of engaging the Hegemony fleet directly, human ships began darting between enemy vessels like wolves harassing a herd of buffalo. They would appear suddenly, fire concentrated bursts at critical systems, then vanish again before the massive Hegemony ships could bring their main guns to bear. The destroyer Lightning, commanded by Captain Sarah Kim, exemplified this new form of warfare. Her ship was 1/10 the size of the smallest Hegemony cruiser, but it moved with an agility that seemed to defy physics. She would appear behind an enemy vessel, target their engine nacelles with precision fire, then disappear into the chaos of battle before they could respond. "This is lightning to all human vessels," she broadcast as her ship disabled its third enemy cruiser. "These big ships turn like glaciers. Hit them fast and get out. Make them afraid to turn their backs on us." The psychological effect on the Hegemony fleet was immediate and devastating. For 2 centuries, they had fought enemies who engaged in honorable, predictable combat. Ship faced ship in neat lines. The stronger force won through superior firepower, and defeated enemies either surrendered or died bravely. These humans fought like they had no honor at all. But the real shock came when the human fleet implemented their second phase. Instead of trying to destroy the massive Hegemony vessels, they began targeting specific systems with surgical precision. Ships that had dominated space battles for decades suddenly found themselves blind, deaf, and powerless as humans systematically disabled their sensors, communications, and weapons. "Supreme Admiral," his tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, "we've lost contact with 60% of our fleet. The humans are not trying to destroy our ships, they're disabling them." Vex stared at his tactical display in growing horror. His perfectly organized fleet was falling apart as human vessels darted through their formations like insects, stinging and vanishing before they could be swatted. Worse, the humans seemed to be coordinating their attacks through that horrible music, using rhythms and crescendos to time their strikes. "All ships, break formation and engage individually," he ordered desperately. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "that's exactly what they want us to do." The moment the hegemony fleet abandoned their coordinated formations, the human ships struck with devastating efficiency. What had appeared to be chaotic movement suddenly revealed itself as carefully orchestrated pack tactics. Groups of human vessels would surround isolated hegemony ships, disable them rapidly, then move on to the next target. But the space battle was only the beginning. As the hegemony fleet struggled with their unprecedented defeat, human landing craft began descending toward Zephyros Prime. The planet's surface was controlled by hegemony ground forces, who had established massive bases and imprisoned the civilian population in concentration camps. Colonel Maria Santos led the first wave of human Marines as they dropped into the atmosphere over the largest hegemony installation. Her troops had spent the journey studying intelligence reports about enemy ground tactics, and what they found was both encouraging and infuriating. "Listen up, Marines," she announced over the communication channel as their drop pods screamed through the atmosphere. "Intelligence says these hegemony ground forces are used to fighting enemies who surrender after the first battle. They've never faced sustained resistance. Let's show them what human Marines do to occupying armies." The hegemony ground commander, General Crix, watched in confusion as human drop pods landed not around his main base but scattered across the countryside. It made no tactical sense. Any competent military force would concentrate their landing to achieve maximum impact. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "the humans have landed in 47 different locations. Most are nowhere near strategic targets." "Then they are fools," Crix replied. "Send patrol units to eliminate these scattered forces." But as hegemony patrols moved out to engage the human landing sites, they discovered something that shattered their understanding of ground warfare. The humans weren't trying to capture territory or destroy installations. They were liberating prisoner camps and turning freed Zephyrians into an armed resistance movement. Within 6 hours of landing, Colonel Santos had freed 3 prisoner camps and armed 2,000 Zephyrian civilians with captured hegemony weapons. Within 12 hours, the liberation had spread to 30 camps across the planet. The hegemony forces, designed to suppress helpless populations, found themselves facing an armed uprising supported by human special forces, who seemed to appear and disappear at will. "This is impossible," General Crix raged as reports flooded in from across the planet. "Civilian populations don't fight back. They accept occupation as the natural order." But the Zephyrians, inspired by the human example and armed with human weapons, proved that any population would fight for freedom when given hope and support. Coordinated by human communications equipment and trained by human Marines, they began systematically dismantling the hegemony occupation. Ambassador Thros, still aboard the UES Determination, watched the liberation of his homeworld with tears streaming down his crystalline face. In 3 days, humans had accomplished what his people had thought impossible. Not just rescue, but complete victory over an enemy that had never been defeated. "Commander Park," he said softly, "my people have a phrase that translates roughly as the fire that spreads from a single spark. I think humans are that spark for the entire galaxy." Jessica nodded as she watched hegemony vessels surrendering or fleeing in all directions. The space battle was over. The ground campaign was succeeding beyond all projections, and word was already spreading through subspace communications to every corner of the galaxy. "Ambassador," she replied, "I think you're right. The hegemony empire just learned something that bullies throughout human history have discovered the hard way. There's always someone bigger and meaner when you pick on the innocent." As the last hegemony forces evacuated from Zephyrian space in complete disarray, Jessica opened a communication channel to Earth. President Vasquez appeared on the screen, her face showing the satisfaction of a leader who had made the right choice, under pressure. "Mission accomplished, Madam President," Jessica reported. "Zephyrian space is liberated, and the hegemony empire is in full retreat." "Casualties?" the President asked. "Minimal on our side, ma'am. We captured or disabled 800 enemy vessels and liberated 14 worlds. Intelligence suggests the hegemony empire is facing rebellion on dozens of other worlds they've conquered. Word is spreading that they can be beaten." President Vasquez smiled. Commander, send a message to every species in the galaxy. Let them know that humanity is now accepting applications for mutual defense treaties. It appears we're going to be very busy protecting our neighbors. As the human fleet prepared to escort the liberated Zephyrian worlds into a new age of freedom, Ambassador Thros composed a message that would be transmitted to every corner of the galaxy. To all species who value freedom and justice, the humans have shown us that no empire is too large, no enemy too powerful when good people stand together. The age of unopposed conquest is over. The age of human protection has begun. The hegemony empire's greatest mistake had been asking the wrong question. They had wondered if humanity could be intimidated into staying out of galactic affairs. They should have asked what happens when you threaten innocent people while humans have ships, weapons, and the will to use them. The answer, as 37 liberated species would soon discover, was freedom.